Hello, ladies and gentlemen. No pressure. This is the first walking, talking mock that I'm going to do, and it's just because I want to make sure that you get a chance to see how you could approach planning and structuring your essays. So here's a mock question, Act 3, Scene 1. In this scene, Banquo expresses his private fears that Macbeth murdered Duncan to become king. Read the extract and answer the question that follows. So the question that follows is, starting with this extract, explain how Shakespeare presents the relationship between Macbeth and Banquo. So you might think there's just one question here, but actually the question's asking us to think about two characters and a theme. This is quite a difficult question if you ignore its main components. So the first thing I'd do is I'd break it down. Relationships. How are relationships supposed to be between these two people? So they're supposed to be friends. They're supposed to care about each other. They're supposed to be loyal, and they're soldiers as well. Okay. And then Macbeth and Banquo's relationship. So three things across the play you could immediately write down, across the play. And in the extract. Okay, so I'd say extract across the play. So before even reading the extract, you could, and I don't recommend you do this, but you could just write down, well, across the play, Macbeth and Banquo's relationship deteriorates. And then you could also write, for example, another thing about their relationship is that of guilt, because Macbeth clearly feels guilty about having murdered his best friend. Don't shake thy gory locks at me, he says at the banquet scene, remember? And then in Banquo's perspective as well, we could say that the relationship across the play is one of suspicion. And we also have the relationship across the play is one of fear. I fear thou playest most foully for it. So there you go. Right? So you could immediately plan across the play how the key question is presented, or we could just do the straight old-fashioned way of focusing on the extract first. Now, most students completely ignore this, and that is where they go wrong. So please be careful, focus on this. We need to notice that Banquo expresses private fears. So that could immediately be, private fears. He is afraid. Okay, he is afraid of Macbeth. He is afraid of Macbeth. Banquo is afraid of Macbeth. And then that Macbeth murdered Duncan. We know that's a fact in the play. He did. We watched it earlier. And to become king. So read the extract and think about the relationship between the two. So here we go. Let's read this. Inter Banquo. Notice the stage direction. How many of you don't actually think about the stage direction? Think about the stage direction. Inter Banquo, thou hast it now. King, Cawdor, Glamis, all, as the weird women promised. Who were those weird women? We should know by now. The alliterative weird women is a reference to the witches. Okay. Promised. And I fear, remember that sense of fear? Here we go. We've got proof that Banquo is afraid of Macbeth. That is the relationship they have right now, that of fear. I fear thou playest most foully for it. Foully for it again, the sense of evil. If you're to play foul, that means you don't follow the rules. That means you break rules, and that means you are causing problems. So clearly here we can say that Banquo and Macbeth's relationship is one ruined by evil. That's what Banquo is afraid of, ruined by evil. Right, let's read on a little bit. Let me arrange this camera, so I'm getting used to it. But that myself should be the root and father of many kings. Oh, escaped one line. It should not stand in thy posterity. But that myself should be the root and father of many kings. So that is clearly referencing to the fact that unfortunately Macbeth's will not have children who would go on to take on his name. Actually, Banquo is aware that the witches promised him that his kids, his future grandchildren, would become kings. So he's saying, if there come truth from them, as upon thee, Macbeth, their speeches shine. So what is he saying? The truth of the witches shine. So Banquo seems to be not so innocent here. Banquo's thinking about how the witches' prophecies came true for Macbeth, so why won't they come true for Banquo? So he's getting absolutely happy about this. He's very similar. Banquo is similar to Macbeth here, as he's quite ambitious about his future grandchildren or grandsons becoming king. It's an exciting idea. Why, by the verities on thee made good, may they not be my oracles as well? So he's saying, if they're giving you good fortune, won't these prophecies give good fortune to myself too? And set me up in hope, but hush no more. So he's saying, shall I be hopeful too about having so much success as Macbeth? And set me up in hope, but hush no more. And here we have this secrecy. Secrecy. He does not want whoever's walking along, about to enter, to listen to his secret thoughts. So let's refresh our memories as to what this extract is showing us. It's showing us that Banquo is afraid. Afraid of Macbeth playing most foully for it, for the title of king. And the fact that, Macbeth is evil in the play. He becomes evil, unfortunately, due to his tragic downfall as a tragic hero. Then Banquo is actually ambitious. He's thinking about the joys of becoming king through his grandsons. He knows that he won't become king because the witches said so, but his grandsons would. So this is exciting and speeches shine. And then he's hopeful, but hush no more. So which parts of this extract show anything about Macbeth and Banquo's relationship? Well, we can say immediately the fear. Fear is the relationship right now. It's a fearful one. And secrecy. Do you see that? And suspicion, because obviously he is suspicious of how Macbeth became king. Now, this is another thing you should notice, stage directions. Look at the stage directions used. Think about the characters who enter and exit and why they've entered and exited. Okay, I'm just going to move this quickly here. The blurriness should depart shortly. Here we go. Da, da, da. And it sounded, enter Macbeth as king, Lady Macbeth as queen, Lennox, Ross, lords, ladies, and attendants. So Banquo was by himself. Okay, so there was a soliloquy there, and now we have the other characters popping in to ruin his thoughts. Macbeth says, as he looks at Banquo, here's our chief guest. So what is he explicitly, in case you don't know what explicitly means, I'm just going to say obvious meaning. So for example, he's obviously pointing out to Banquo saying, here's our most important guest, chief guest, right? Implicitly is a hidden message. Implicitly. Hidden message. What's the hidden message here, or hidden meaning to the audience? Well, we should know by now that this is dramatic irony. Do you know what dramatic irony is? Dramatic irony is when it's not dramatic irony, it's irony. Okay, so it's irony there. Okay, so why is it ironic? Because we know that Macbeth doesn't really see Banquo as his chief, most important friend anymore. If anything, it's almost the opposite. He sees Banquo as a possible enemy, because Banquo was there when he met the witches in Act 1, Scene 3, so you can write down about later on in the play, Act 1, Scene 3, earlier on in the play, sorry, Act 1, Scene 3, where in which the witches prophesied about Macbeth becoming king, and Macbeth is naturally paranoid that Banquo might tell people about the situation. Let's read on. Lady Macbeth says, if he had been forgotten, it had been as a gap in our great feast, and all thing unbecoming. So she's saying, oh, we would never have forgotten him. How odd, that would never have happened. That would have been a gap, so unnatural. Macbeth, tonight we hold a solemn supper, sir, and I'll request your presence. A serious supper, sir, and I'll request your presence. Okay, so we've got this kind of good manners, explicitly good manners. They seem to be content with each other, respecting each other. Yeah, that is explicitly. But let's be honest, implicitly, in a hidden way. Implicitly, the audience should know. Okay, implicitly, we know that Macbeth does not really respect Banquo at all. He sees him as an enemy. He sees him as a danger. And Banquo, implicitly, also has this terror about Macbeth. So let's look over here. Let your highness command upon me to the which my duties are, with a most indissoluble tie, for ever knit. So he's saying, basically, your highness. So the relationship is that of king and his servant, really. Okay, his inferior. Banquo is the inferior character here. Inferior. Oops. There we go. Inferior character. Command upon me. So he's stating explicitly, I await your instructions. He will follow him. He will believe him. Indissoluble tie, they are forever connected. Indissoluble means it doesn't dissolve, and that the tie is forever knit, so connected by loyalty and love and care. But implicitly, what do we already know? This is when we move on to dramatic irony, as I was about to say earlier. Now, dramatic irony is when the audience knows a little bit more than one character or another. So the dramatic irony here is that we as an audience just heard Banquo admitting that he does not respect Macbeth, that he believes Macbeth played most foully for the role of king, and therefore Banquo's mentioning how there is a most indissoluble tie forever knit, and command me, your highness. We know that these are all false statements. He's lying to Macbeth. He does not trust Macbeth at all, and neither does Banquo trust him. Okay, so you've got that. You've got a lot of annotations there. Now, the main thing you do in your exam is to narrow it down, quality over quantity. If you go on waffling forever, it's not going to look good. So to move this out of the way, let's get a nice sheet of lined paper. Okay, here we go. Nice sheet of lined paper. And just plan. So here we go. We've got Macbeth and Banquo's relationship. Remember, you get marks for AO1, AO2, and AO3. AO1, points and quotes. If you've got no quotes, exactly, you've got no hope. And then AO2 is language and structure. With structure, think about genre. This is a tragedy play after all. Okay? Tragedy genre. You get marks for telling me things about Hamartia and tragic downfall, tragic hero, and all of that stuff. I can tell you that later. Anyway, language and structure, analysis, effect on audience. And then you have context for AO3, and that is social, political, historical context. Okay, so that's the mark scheme. Don't forget that. But anyway, Macbeth and Banquo's relationship in the extract. So I'll just put E for extract. Quickly, let's look back here. We said fearful one. Remember? So we're going to write down here fear in the extract. Another one is secrecy. So we're going to write down secrets, secretive. Okay, and then another one is suspicion. Okay, so we're going to write down here suspicion. Okay, so you've got those three things about the extract. Now let's think about the rest of the play. how was Macbeth and Banquo's relationship at the beginning? How was it at the middle? How was it at the end? So here's an easy way of thinking about the rest of the play, links to the rest of the play. You've got beginning, middle, and end of the play. The beginning of the play, Macbeth and Banquo have a fantastic friendship. Okay, it's a strong friendship. Okay, they've just won battle. Okay, they respect each other. There's true respect. But then things go horribly wrong when in Act 1, Scene 3. Do you remember when he meets the witches? The witches change everything, and from then on, it's just a case of moving on to fear and secrets and suspicion. Okay. Middle of the play. After Macbeth kills the king, how does he feel about later on? How does he feel about what's his name? Sorry, how does Macbeth feel about Banquo? We clearly know that Macbeth does not like the fact that Banquo is alive. Banquo might tell everybody his secret. Okay, so there's a restless ecstasy. There's a quote you could use from Act 3, Scene 2. So Act 3, Scene 2 is when Macbeth admits to his lovely wife, Lady Macbeth, that he is terrified of Banquo. And he mentions how we have scorched the snake, not killed it. And so that's my quote there for later on in the play. And then we're moving now to the ending of the play. The end of the play, near the end, what happens? Well, obviously, Macbeth kills Banquo. Now, it doesn't kill him with his own hands. He hires murderers, but Macbeth gets Banquo killed. Macbeth gets Banquo killed. And what's the relationship there? Obviously one of guilt later on, because in the banquet scene, remember? The banquet scene is don't shake thy gory locks at me. He's haunted. His guilty conscience is overtaking him because he killed his best friend. So we have fear, we have secrets, we have suspicion earlier on in the extract. Later on, we have death, guilt, murder, paranoia, and the strong friendship is completely ruined because of the witches and Macbeth's overarching, overleaping ambition. Ambition which overleaps itself, you see? So, now you've got your extract, you've got your rest of the play. Quickly think of any relevant historical information. So the fact that he's killing the king and his friend, this is an excellent way for you to say, well, I know about regicide and how, killing the divine rights of kings was mentioned by King James I, who was the monarch of England at the time that this play was written. And you can say how, just like Macbeth and his horrendous sequences of events, here we've got the friendship is being broken down because Macbeth has decided to go against the divine rights of kings, so he's being punished. What else could we say? In the Victorian era, it was looked at. Victorian era? Sorry about that. That's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in my mind. Clearly, it's Jacobean era. Jacobean era, women were perceived to be inferior than men, and therefore the Jacobean audience would have been baffled as to why Macbeth is taking advice from his wife rather than his best friend, Banquo. So what we have here is a little bit of AO3, not too much, because remember AO2 is where you get your real marks, your ability to go back to that extract with your quotes and say how language and structure has been used. So fear, secrets, suspicion. And what I do is I just write down 1, 2, secrets, suspicion, 3. Okay, those are my 3 quotes for extract. And as for the rest of the play, my quotes are there because I memorized them, I revised them. So if you haven't revised Macbeth, guess what? Go read a plot summary immediately and type into Google Macbeth quotes and start memorizing some quotes from the beginning, the middle, and the end of the play before your exam, because every quote is a little piece of hope, because through that quote you're able to break down and look at the language analysis. So just to give you an example, okay, we've got here the fact that he's referring to the witches as weird women, which seems to structurally represent how they are being treating the witches more seriously rather than seeing them as odd creatures. They're believing them, and therefore that's why we've got that noun women rather than witches used. And that is an example of language analysis, all used from that short little quote. Foully for it. Now again, we've got the word foul and connotations of not following the rules, or connotations of evil and connotations of rotten foods and smells. So we have here clearly negative imagery, negative sensory language. So we can also mention this as well. I fear emotive language there. I fear thou playest most foully for it. And then you've also got juxtaposition between Banquo's secret hope for his grandsons, to become king, and his fear of Macbeth's strategies for becoming king as well. Hush no more. You've got that exclamatory hush no more. So this fear for use of the exclamation mark represents how he's terrified of Macbeth finding out his secret ideas and thoughts. Okay, so there is some language analysis as well. Now, as I mentioned before, structure is beginning, middle, and end. Any changes of tone and pace across the extract and the play as a whole. And so what we can say is you can structure it again, your essay, fear, secrets, and so on in the extract. However, later on in the play, well, actually earlier on in the play, they had a strong friendship. They were best friends. And then you could talk about how this all changes because of Act 1, Scene 3, but you need to have some quotes. Otherwise, it would sound like a summary, plot summary, and that's not what the examiner wants. The examiner wants evidence that you've memorized some quotes and historical information relevant to the question. Okay. Act 3, Scene 2, Lady Macbeth and Macbeth, and how they are thinking about plotting to kill Banquo, that's Macbeth in particular, and Macbeth gets Banquo killed through these murderers that he hires, again showing that the relationship has ended, and Macbeth is a traitor in many ways. So hopefully that's helped you out. That's the plan. There's your mark scheme so you don't forget what to do. And then you start your paragraph. So I'd start my paragraph and say, use the question as an answer. Here's the question. Starting with this extract, explain how I would say Shakespeare presents the relationship between Macbeth and Banquo as one of fear in the extract from Act 3, Scene 1. This is primarily because Banquo, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so that's what you can mention. So hopefully that's helped you a little bit. Apologies if it was a bit rushed, but I just wanted to give you a quick walking, talking plan on Macbeth, and I will do one on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Good luck.